Hey guys, it's Danny. Today it is time to recap the orchids we had in bloom for the month of September, and this month we actually have quite a few first-time bloomers. So I'm gonna go through them pretty fast. Don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it, and why not subscribe? I post 3 times a week. So let's begin. First orchid we're gonna look at is the Paphiopedilum Maugier Green. It is an orchid which is not new to my collection. It bloomed quite a few times in the past, and not only does it have a really nice bloom, but also take a look at those leaves. It is one of those orchids that looks good even if not in bloom. And by the way, you might hear some noises in the background. That is daisy bloom, which I will present to you in a different video. So I hope the noises won't bother you too much. Okay, back to the orchid. This is not a fragrant orchid, and typically it only creates one single bloom on top of each flower spike. I will link you down below to my video that talks about the care of slipper orchids. So if you're new to them, check the video down below in the description. Next up, here we have the Lepanthes calodictyon, and look at that, I managed to get some blooms. This miniature orchid blooms on its leaves. The flower spikes actually lean on the leaves, which, by the way, the leaves look absolutely beautiful as well. This is a rather new orchid for me, so I'm not entirely sure what to tell you about its care from experience. It has been quite an easy grower so far, and I'm happy to see the blooms, but the main attraction of the plant is the foliage. Next up, this is the Aliceara Torero. This is an orchid we rescued last year, and finally it bloomed. Now, it is really beautiful. It is an Aliceara, I love it, but the only thing I don't really like about it is the fact that the petals and sepals are pulled back. If only the flower was flat, I would love it even more because it has really beautiful and wild colors. But yeah, this year at least, the petals really don't look very flat. We'll see what happens next year, but I do remember when I purchased it, even though the flowers were not very fresh, they were looking pretty similar. So I do believe that genetically wise, this orchid is programmed to have these types of blooms, which is a bit of a shame, but they're beautiful nonetheless. Next up, here we have the Miltonidium Klara, which one of you guys helped me identify. It is that beautiful Oncidium type which has quote-unquote variegated flowers. I don't believe there's such a thing, but they kind of look like it. They have this white margin on the petals and on the lip as well. It is a beautiful and vigorous hybrid as far as I can see. Scent-wise, I don't really detect much, but I really enjoy the flowers. It is blooming pretty reliably, although the flowers don't last all that much individually. So by the time the last flower opens, actually the first flower fades away. Doesn't make for a great display, but individual flowers look very pretty. Next up, we have Potinara Hokugem Sunspots. This is an orchid which was very sick, and I managed to recoup it. It's actually a pretty vigorous hybrid, and just look at those flowers. It looks very similar to another orchid which I have, the Sunmake Gold. We will see her in bloom next month, but it is a little different. This one has a bit of a scent during nighttime, I discovered, and in good health, it actually has a really beautiful inflorescence. Much richer than what you see on the screen right now. Also, when the flowers open, they tend to be a little bit more purple than this, and I do believe it's a trait from the Brassavola parentage. It does actually look like a Brassavola. The scent in the nighttime is very reminiscent of Brassavolas as well, and it's one of those orchids that I kind of always wanted. Next up, here we have Aliceara Hilo Ablaze Hilo Gold. Oh my goodness, look at those flowers. I do believe this is the highlight of this month. At least for me, I absolutely love Alicearas. I love orange colors, autumny colors. Autumn is very far away from me, so at least I will enjoy some autumnish looking flowers. It is a typical Aliceara, takes the same care, smells peppery, it's quite vigorous in my opinion, and the flowers are huge, absolutely huge. Those colors though, absolutely amazing. This is an awarded hybrid, actually, not my particular orchid, but generally this hybrid, and I can totally see why. I'm in love with this orchid. Next up, we have another Brassavola hybrid. This is Brassavola cucullata crossed with Laelia purpurata. And I do believe the hybrid has a name. I'm just missing it right now. It is a first-time bloomer, and look at that flower. It takes after the cucullata kinda in the spidery petals and sepals, but also it has the coloration of the Laelia purpurata. Scent-wise, it does smell like the Laelia purpurata as well. In the daytime, it has no fragrance in the nighttime, which is kind of surprising. I was expecting it to be a nighttime fragrant orchid, but it's not. And if you see the throat of the lip, you can clearly see the influence of the Laelia purpurata. It is absolutely gorgeous. I had it ever since she was a very young plant. I do believe she can put out more blooms than this, but this is the very first time it blooms, and I'm very, very happy with the flower. Next, here we have a little kitty, Cattleya Tropical Pointer Cheetah, one of my little jewels. This one is a sort of medium-sized Cattleya orchid which produces these very candy-looking flowers. Don't they inspire candy to you? They kind of do to me. Although scent-wise, they don't smell like candy, they actually don't smell like anything. You would expect a fragrance from this orchid, right? Well, there's nothing there. But the flowers are really, really pretty. It's not a big orchid. The flowers are not big either, but this color is very subtle and very delicate as well. And if you hear some car engines in the background, I'm so sorry. I don't know who revs their car like there's no tomorrow right now. I can't make it stop. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, definitely the tropical pointer is a very popular hybrid. Easy to grow, takes the exact same care as any other Cattleya, so I will be sure to link my Cattleya tutorial in the description as well. Next up, here we have the BC St. Andre, which is not a new orchid at all. This year it produced 2 flowers, but as you can see, the colors are washed away. And this is because I waited a little bit too long with filming this orchid, and as the flowers age, they do lose the beautiful purple on the lip. When the blooms first open, the lip is a really intense purple color, but within a week or so, the color fades to this really pretty, I would say, vintagey looking color, very pale. But the flower is still beautiful, it's still nighttime fragrant, smells like a Brassavola, and it is actually a pretty huge flower. Again, takes the very same care as any other Cattleya, and it blooms multiple times per summer. It does not bloom in the winter time for me, probably due to the temperature, and it also doesn't grow as fast. But other than that, she is a fast grower, easy, and vigorous hybrid as well. Next, surprise, surprise, we have a Fragmipedium. This is a cross between the Ainsworthii and the Dick Clements. And to be honest, I was expecting it to be a little bit more red than this because of the Clements hybrid, but it's not. It's actually a pretty pale pink. It is pretty, it is dainty. I really like it. It's my most successful Fragmipedium so far, so I do really like it, but it's not very colorful. One thing that's interesting is that the flowers don't last all that much, maybe a week and a half, then they fall as they are. They don't start to fade on the actual stem, and then another bud comes right away. So it is a sequential bloomer, but it also branches out. Do you see that it has multiple branches with multiple buds? Yeah, each branch is sequential. So I have this guy blooming and reblooming for about 2 months now. I was hoping to get more blooms in the shot, but before all the buds that I want to film open, the flowers fall. Anyway, not a fragrant orchid, but really pretty nonetheless. Next up, here we have the Phalaenopsis tying Shin fly eagle, which is a Tetraspis hybrid, and it did inherit the really wonderful trait of the Tetraspis of actually blooming a little bit different with every flowering. As you can see, I have a flower that has a fully yellow petal right there. All the others seem to have the tip yellow more or less. It's always a surprise what the flowers will look like. You can actually have full red or full yellow petals. I didn't have full yellow petals up until now. I am still waiting for that day, but I did see some pictures on the internet. I don't really know what influences the coloring. Some people place the blame, quote unquote, on environment. I never discovered a trigger for it. Light, temperature, fertilizer, watering. There's nothing that I can attribute to the color exactly. But who knows, maybe in the future I can find a correlation. But to be honest, I kind of like to be surprised. Next up, we have the Oncidopsis Bartley Star, which is, I believe, a relative of the Bartley Schwartz because it smells the same and looks kind of similar. If the orchid does not have flowers, it looks identical to the Bartley Schwartz, but you can see the flowers are just a little bit different. The petals and sepals are actually a little bit skinnier, and the overall flower looks a little bit more spidery, but it does smell the same. It has a very faint, sweet fragrance to it. It is really, really pretty, and it's one of the orchids we saved last year, yet again. Next up, we have the Rhyncattleanthe Burana Beauty. I did a video recently where I recommended the best of the best when it comes to Cattleya orchids or hybrids that I own, and this was amongst the first. I think the third recommendation. Oh boy, oh boy. This orchid grows very fast, blooms really beautifully, and smells like roses. I love it. The fragrance is so powerful. It's out of this world, to be fully honest. I had a little bit of bad luck with this one. We had a very bad windstorm at some point. It got knocked over, it fell on the ground, it lost some buds. I actually had more flowers than this, but it wasn't meant to be this year. But this orchid blooms multiple times a year, so maybe I can catch her with a better blooming soon. Definitely a must-have if you absolutely have to have fragrant Cattleyas. Next up, a first-time bloomer, and what a first-time bloomer. This is the Cattleya Chian-Tzy Loddisong Summer Beauty, and it's one of the ICU orchids. Can you believe it? Do any of you know what the ICU orchids are? Yeah, it's a very old project from more than 4 years ago, before I actually arrived to Cyprus. I received some back divisions from some orchids which were pretty stressed, and to top off their stress, I moved countries and I stressed them even more. Some of you might remember the Fusarium outbreak and the lack of medium. I'm not gonna go into the history. This is one of those orchids. And the fact that it managed to bloom after 5 years, it's not her fault, it is absolutely my fault. But finally, I have her in bloom, and what a sight to behold. I love the lip. Look at that beautiful contrast. Usually you see a Cattleya which has lighter colored petals and a deeper lip. But no, this one is the other way around, and I have to say, I love the inversion. The only thing that lacks from this orchid is a proper fragrance. It has a very, very subtle fragrance to me, given it is the first time when it blooms, so who knows, maybe in time the scent will develop more. I don't know exactly how stressed she still is. She doesn't appear to be, she grows very vigorously now. But yeah, I hope that the fragrance will elaborate in the future because she has some really fragrant parentage. So far, she doesn't really smell as great as I wanted her to, but take a look at those flowers. I don't know which one I like best, the Aliceara or this one. And trust me, in real life, she's just as charming. The camera doesn't actually do justice to the color, which looks a little warmer in reality. On camera, it looks like a pretty cold purple, but it's not really like this. Next up, a really old Cattleya in my collection. This is a NoID Reddish Cattleya. There are many of them looking like her, so I don't know what ID to put or associate with her and be correct. So I'm just gonna call her a NoID. She's a flower shop find. She might not look like much. She's also stressed. It's an old orchid and it's been through a lot. But what I love about her is the fragrance. It's very high up there in my preferences. She smells a little bit like freesias with notes of mint, if you will, and some sweetness. So hard to describe. Flowery, but with a lot of layers. And each year she smells better and better because she gets healthier and healthier. But you can tell she's not happy necessarily. She is sit back. But she's not actually a fast or vigorous grower. I don't know if she has fusarium. She might as well have, because she did catch the full effect of that outbreak that I had. But I'm keeping her because she's beautiful, she grows. It's just one of those ones that I have to baby a lot. Next up, we have Miltonia Peter Komp, which you might already know. I have her for a couple of years or 3 years already. She became a reliable bloomer, although she had issues in the past adapting to semi-hydroponics. Now she's okay. The flower spike this year is really nice, really impressive. I still don't have a proper fragrance. Some people detect a fragrance with this orchid. I don't, but that's okay because I can truly appreciate the flowers. They have a really nice spotted pattern, which I find wild and nice, and I really like it. So the lack of fragrance isn't really upsetting me all that much. I really like this orchid, and I think she's an easy grower, provided she's not sit back and she enjoys the medium she's planted in. Next up, we have Miltonia Sandy's Cove, which is one of the most beautiful Miltonias that I've ever seen. I'm happy to have her. It was a little harder to come by. I didn't find her in a flower shop, but I did manage to find her on eBay actually, and she's just as easy to grow as the Miltonia Peter Komp. There is no fragrance with this one either, maybe a slight, faint, sweet type of scent. I don't even know, to be honest. I don't detect any peppery fragrance either. Usually that trait in Alicearas comes from the Brassica parentage. But take a look at these colors. I love the contrast between this magenta and the golden yellow. And the dots are just the cherry on the cake. Next we have Aliceara Tahoma Glacier, again a very popular orchid. You can find it in flower shops as well. This one produces pretty large flowers. Mine has a little issue with dehydration this year. She's a really large orchid with a large root system, and I have some issues staying on top of watering. Also, the flowers are large, very floofy. They take up quite a lot of water as well. And if you are not available to water, you get unopened flowers pretty much. But she's beautiful still, smells a little peppery like any Aliceara, but it's one of those orchids which is very iconic, I believe. Next we have an Oncidium NoID Red. It looks a little bit like the Colibri, but it's not. It's one of those that we saved last year. They're starting to bloom and bounce back, so you're gonna see many of them in the following months. This one is not fragrant. I don't really know what ID to give it. I didn't see anything super similar to it on the internet. I mean, I did see a lot of Similar oncidiums, but really not all that close when it comes to the pattern of the color. Anyway, I do really enjoy this one. I hope to find an ID. It takes the very same care as any other oncidium, and I'm happy it made a full recovery. Next up, we have another NoID Oncidium. This time it's a yellow one. It looks a little bit like the jungle monarch, but it's not. It's a lot more yellow than this. This one is quite set back. I'm surprised it bloomed. But as you can see, the flower spike is not all that impressive. It will take a little while until this orchid will become vigorous. It has no fragrance, but I know that it is capable to produce a lot of tiny little blooms. Inflorescences are pretty showy, so I'm hoping that I will get a better bloom next time. Next up, we have another first-time bloomer. This is Phalaenopsis hieroglyphica. I don't know if you knew I had it. I didn't get a chance to present it. But yeah, this is a summer bloomer, just like the Bellina. It is, again, one of the more popular species. I did know about it for a long time, but I had other stuff on my wish list before it. But I did manage to find it at a decent price on eBay, and hey presto, I bought it. And look at that flower. It looks so interesting. Bonus, the flower is actually rather large. Larger than the Bellina. Don't expect the size of the white Phalaenopsis on the market, but definitely pretty large for a summer bloomer. The fragrance is very typical, a sort of fruity kind of scent, a little sweet. It's nothing like the Bellina really. I wouldn't purchase this orchid for the fragrance, but definitely for the pattern. Next up, we have an orchid which is older again in my collection. This is Phalaenopsis Penang Girl crossed with the Violacea. Reason why I'm not actually purchasing a Violacea. I do have quite a few orchids that remind me of her. This one has almost identical colors to the Violacea, and it actually smells very similar as well. It does have a very sweet, cinnamony type of fragrance that I really like. So I don't see a reason to purchase the Violacea since I have this one, and she is a good bloomer for the past few years. Next up, we have the Psychopsis mariposa with another bloom. I expect this flower spike to bloom for quite a few years now. Every 2 months, we're gonna see it in bloom. And rather than me talking too much about it, I will link you down below to a care tutorial. I will just say that the flower is not fragrant. It is really beautiful, out of this world, but the flower spike is very awkward. It is very tall, and if you don't have tall shelves, it might be a little problematic to display it. But the flower is really, really beautiful. Next, here we have the Solagene usitana. This is a flower on a different flower spike, but as you can see, this flower spike as well will not bloom a lot. The usitana is a setback orchid. I am working to rejuvenate it, so I'm not all that upset that I don't have a lot of sequential blooms on a flower spike. We did talk about it quite a lot this year or this summer. She bloomed quite a lot, so I'm expecting greater things for her in the future. And the last orchid we're gonna see today is another hybrid. This is Brassavola nodosa crossed with Laelia purpurata variety Carnea 4N. I guess I can call it the BC Morning Glory, but apparently this one has that Carnea 4N parent, which is a little bit more special, I guess. Anyway, this is not a new orchid. Some of you might know it, but in the past, it only bloomed with one flower. This year, she's a lot more vigorous, a lot more established, and I have 2 little flowers on it. It is really pretty, and it is not a nighttime fragrant orchid. It actually smells like the Laelia, but if you look at it, you will expect it to smell like the Brassavola nodosa. So this has to be it for this month. I do have some other orchids which I will present next month. They're not necessarily in full bloom. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And with that said, I'll see you next time. Bye!